if I can go into a company, help them hire their head of design, if I can help them build out their team, if I can help them figure out their innovation strategies, figure out their go to market, whatever those things are, and stack those things up over a period of time, and then walk away once that team is strong and understands and has a point of view and is going off in the right direction. Awesome.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm a 20-year creative executive, leadership and life coach, author, speaker, and serial entrepreneur. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. What's up, everyone? Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Today, another good friend of mine, Travis McCleery, founder and chief design officer at Ultra Friends. He's also held design leadership roles at Netflix, Twitter, and Imprint. Travis, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and jumping right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I think it feels unique to me, but it's probably not super unique at times. But yeah, I actually had no concept of the idea of design or design as a career all the way until I was a freshman in college. Um, I really loved math and science and art and thought I'd be an architect. And I went to a school that didn't have an architecture program, so I took computer science as my entry point. And the thought was always like, I'll just do a couple years here, then go to an architecture program and so on. And after my first semester, I was like, I can't do this computer engineering thing. Not because I didn't understand it, but more so it was just I found it really boring, and had a hard time grasping at this like need for instant gratification. Like when you're designing, you're seeing the pixels move around and you're doing all the stuff. But when you're writing lots of code, it just wasn't there. It wasn't clicking for me. And I knew I wanted to do something in art, but I was concerned that my parents and people that supported me would not be as understanding of the concept of getting into art. So I went to a advisor at the school and I was like, "Hey, I want to do an art program. What do you suggest?" And they were like, graphic design. So I went back to my family and parents and I was like, I'm ready to get out of this program and I need to move to something else and I want to do something in art. And my dad said, as long as it has to do with computers, I'm fine with it. That was like the precursor for whatever. And I was like, well, good thing because I'm going to get into graphic design. Had no idea what I was getting myself into. I'd never used a Mac in my life. I never used any Adobe products in my life. But I had experience when I was in high school making posters for shows in MS Paint and Xerox machines and things of that nature, and had some other like endeavors that were on doing work like making stickers and stuff for skateboards and whatnot. So I dive head in on it, and I felt like I was a little bit behind by the time I started because there was all these kids that knew what they were doing. So I would spend lots and lots of hours in the labs, and then once I got my first Mac, I would spend all the time like working and grinding. And this was like basically I was going to graduate right around the last big downturn of the economy in 2007, and I kept on being told by my professors like be prepared to not be able to find a job in your field. And I was like, there's no fucking way that that's going to happen for me, man. I'm not accepting that. I didn't just do this 4+ years of schooling to like not do this work. So I took on any job that anybody would give me and made sure that my portfolio did not have a single piece of school work in it. And that I knew it wouldn't be the best portfolio, but it would at least show that I could do the work. I had the soft skills. I was going to be the person that would grind it and figure it out. And so by the time that I was graduating and all these things were happening, the design world was changing quite dramatically. You know, the iPhone had come out. We were learning a lot about Flash. It was dying on the vine. Like I was watching it in real time. Um, I ended with a degree that was focused on web, but thought that branding and visual design was like the pinnacle. So you wanted to go to a firm that had that ability. I went into small agency life real fast. And for those who know, being in an agency is a lot of hours, a lot of grinding, a lot of doing what the client asks, things of that nature. But it was the first point in which I started to realize like design is not just the thing that you put on the screen, but it's like this end product, and it takes a lot of people to like make this end product. And we were building a lot of websites in my first agency, and at the time, the concept was like, we'll design something, and we literally called it throwing it over the fence. And then you'd go on to the next project and start designing, and then 2 3 months later, something would exist on the flip side. But there was no interaction between design and engineering at the time. I just found that so odd. And so, I would spend time sitting at the edge of their desk, at the engineers' desks, to get it to the way that I wanted to see it and like the way that it would make the most sense. And that kind of kick started off like me really trying to really understand all the people I work with, not just designers, not just my craft. And from there, it was just take on any opportunity that it came my way. I worked
Yeah.
at some smaller places, some bigger agencies, and kind of growing up in the Midwest and getting to what was the pinnacle of graphic design in the Midwest, I had hit this wall where I could stay at an agency and continue to climb that ladder, or I could try in house and try what like really see if my skills were as sharp as I thought they were. Um, I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder on proving that I had the skills and the abilities that were renowned or looked at as being renowned in the Bay Area or in New York. And so I went to the Bay and I worked at Evernote and then landed at
Mm.
Netflix. And it was a huge shift in my design career to see like go from, hey, we're making stuff for teams that you don't really get to interact with, you don't get to see the final impact, you don't get to like there's just like this huge disconnect between you and the user, to being right there in the thick of it and working in product and working with some really really talented folks, learning what I thought is the core of leadership. And after that, I tried my luck at some startup work again, and coming back and forth between all these things, kind of following where the opportunities would take me. And in the past couple months, I have made the huge shift from being employed by somebody to starting my own thing. And well, I shouldn't say my own thing. I'm starting a thing with one of my best friends, Kevin Rapp, and it's called the Ultra Friends, and we're trying it out, trying to see what we can do on our own, see what we can go. It's kind of a weird thing, man. I left agency life thinking like I'm never going back, and I've now come full circle into this. Like I'm back into the agency model again, but I'm trying to make it better this second time around. So
Yeah, but you're going into it with lessons learned, and
yeah,
so yeah, there's a lot I want to go back to. You said some really great things, um, and yeah, I wanted to start with what was the moment you knew, right? Because you said you've always like loved art. What was the moment? Was there a moment in time where you're like, I just want to be a creative? Was it a in school? Was it a movie? Was it some graphic, some experience you had? What was that
yeah.
moment?
So my senior year in high school, I was working at a movie theater, and I we had like first dibs on the posters when they would all like when they were done being used. And there was this moment in time where like I went back through all these posters that I had accumulated over the year and realized that there was like a style and a uniqueness to this catalog. It wasn't just like here's all the movies I liked. It was all the ones that I found interesting. And they were posters that were super type heavy, that were not about revealing the whole plot, that were unique and not just like the kind of like ghost head versions that were really popular in the early 2000s and whatnot. And I just remember thinking like, if this is a job, this is the job I want. Like but I was like, but that's not a job. There's no way that's a job. And it's just like such a naive kind of like concept in mind. But I was like, that's the thing. And I I really, really love that. And I'd say maybe one other instance of it was um we didn't have a skateboard shop in our town. And so we used to have to order online and through magazines and things of that nature. Uh, and because we were because we were so poor, we were trying to figure out ways to get around having to pay full price for skateboards, and we would buy blanks. And but we didn't want them to just say blank, so we would make stickers, and we'd like spray paint the bottoms and paint the bottoms of it. And I was like, that was another one of those moments. I was like, if this is a job, that's a job I want. As I want to make skateboards. And so those were the two times that I thought like, but it always ended with, "Oh, that's not real, though. There's no way that's a real job, right? Like that's just something somebody does on the side, you know." So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, knowing now, looking back, right? Because and that's why I wanted to start this podcast too, is because those things are real, right? Like
oh
I
yeah,
built an entire team at Netflix that did exactly what you're
exactly,
saying, right?
exactly.
And how do snowboard? I mean, yeah, well, snowboard and skateboard
Yes.
companies get this artwork, right? They need to get it done.
Hmm.
And then there was also a couple more things. So like, thank you for sharing that because it's always interesting for me to hear what made people fall in love with their craft or fall in love with creativity. The other thing you mentioned was I took C plus classes and I was bored also. So I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do this for a living. And that was C plus. I didn't even get into more complex stuff.
Yeah,
But the
no, thing we used was C plus. It was there was a class I took that it was the second class of that series, and it was hardware and software mixed into both. And so like the first half of the semester, you're building these like very simplistic robots. And I was like, this is it. I love this. And then the second half is that you're programming these robots to do a task that is like very like strict and by the like you could only do it in the one way that they were suggesting it. And I just remember being like, this is boring. I don't want it. I built this cool thing. I wanted to do more than just like walk into a wall and then back up. Like that's whatever. I don't care. But
yeah.
yeah, it was just really, really rough.
Um I didn't even get that far. So kudos to you for getting that far. The other thing is, and this is something that even a lot of my coaching clients struggle with because a lot of them are creatives, is, I like what you said about you weren't going to have any of your schoolwork in your portfolio and
Mhm.
you would take anything and everything, right? So one, it proves that you're willing to put in the work to perfect your craft, to get in and do whatever is done needs to be done. Plus, you have real world stuff in your portfolio. So I'm not
Exactly.
saying that folks can't have stuff from school, but I
Exactly.
love that you were driven in that way. But the question for me that I would love people to hear this answer to is at what point, because you said like there was probably some stuff in there that wasn't great, but it was for actual real world products.
Yeah.
So at what point did you feel like you were good enough, or because you said you had something to prove, you
Ooh.
wanted to go to the
Oh,
coasts
man.
and be like, like I can do this. So at what point did you feel that?
I I don't think that that ever left, to be honest. I think maybe after my first tenure at Netflix did I feel like, okay, I have experience that justifies the output. But by that time, my career was shifting from like staff IC, like I'm in the weeds, I'm pushing the pixels, I'm doing that work, to shifting into more manager and leader and all these other things. And then it was like it pressing a restart button on that whole feeling. So if I'm really honest with myself, I don't think it has gone away. And that's a double-edged sword, right? Like it it builds in me and it drives me to continue to be better at what I'm working on, but it also provides that self-doubt that is not very healthy, to us. And like uh therapy has helped out quite a bit with that, but I don't think it's ever gone away that like I've been able to fully say like, yeah, I am of this talent and of this caliber because there's always a step up from where I'm at. And my dad said this thing to me a long time ago. My dad is works at a centrifuge plant, nuclear engineer, brilliant person. But then he also decided to start his own business on the side where he's considered one of the top golf club makers in the entire world. Right. So he has no business being one, but two of these amazing things. And he said that like once you consider yourself like the best at something, like you have mastered a thing, is the moment that you become irrelevant in that thing, right? And he's basically took it as like if I ever think I've hit some wall that I'm not going to learn anything else, then it's time to pick up the next hobby. It's time to do the next thing. And that stuck with me. Like there's always something that I can learn. There's always something I can do. And design's such a wide space of things that we can do and learn that I figure there's always something we can do. But
That's
yeah.
I love that answer. I love your dad's perspective on it too. Um, because you're both right, right? You never really arrive. And if you feel like you arrive, you should check if that's
Oh
true
yeah.
or not,
Oh yeah.
right? But I think it's why I asked you the question because you have this path from like also want to ask you what does Midwest design mean? So you have this path from like Midwest to Silicon Valley and things like that. Um, and these are the questions that people face. Like, am I good enough to work at a Netflix, a Twitter? Am I good enough to be a VP of design somewhere? Like these things. And even if I struggled with it too, you've struggled with it too, but it didn't stop us, right?
Correct.
It's when it
Correct.
becomes a something you lean into. When you lean into that feeling,
Hmm.
that's when it starts to do harm. But
Hmm.
you should always be the consummate student. Like we're always learning, we're always getting better, you're always perfecting your craft. And to your point, whether it's technology or new techniques, there's always something to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. There's a I while I may let this internal dialogue kind of spin around, it never comes out on the flip side. So if I'm in a professional environment, like game on, right? Like there's and I'm not going to show that aspect of like my thinking, or at least that's a lot of how most of my career was like I'm confident, I know I can do this. If I don't know the answer, I will figure it out and I will instill I won't lie, but I'll instill confidence in the person that's on the other side of the call, the table, whatever. And I mean, I do think there was a point in time where it became a little bit easier where I was like, I think I am qualified for this. But even like for director level jobs, there's times where I've sat there and been like, well, am I really that qualified for this position or whatever? I'm just like, well, I mean, the worst they can say is no. Like that's I'm gonna keep that in mind when I go and apply for something. Mainly because I had a regret early on in my career where um I had had a couple years in design, and there was this entry level position at Burton Snowboards, and they're based in Vermont, and they had this really amazing website that was all about like, when it snows, we all go out and ride and like all this stuff. And I was like, this sounds amazing. And I didn't apply for it because I didn't think I had the chops. And it like kind of sat in the back of my head all the time, like well, could I have done this or couldn't I, whatever. And I met some people that worked there during that time, and we talked about this exact story and everything. They're like, "Oh yeah, you could have worked there for sure." Like, it was a lot of people that didn't know what they were doing. They just liked snowboarding and wanted to make cool stuff. And so a lot of times when I talk to younger designers and things like that, it's like, if you feel something in your gut and you're like, this sounds really cool, like, it's worth going after. Um, and it's worth trying. And if you get told no, then it's fine. Like, there's plenty of jobs out there, and it might not be the best thing the first time, but you can always work towards like the thing you want down the road. And there's a lot of luck and a lot of other things that go into it that have nothing to do with you as a person or your skill or anything like that. That sometimes you have to separate that from, getting a gig and whatnot. But
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I could have missed out on Zappos
yeah,
if I didn't apply, and to be honest, my interview with it was Matt Burchard. He's like I think he's like the head of e-commerce at Allbirds or something like that now.
yeah,
But anyways, if we didn't connect on the Bay Area stuff, I don't know if he would have hired me, right? We're both Giants fans, Niner fans, right? And it was less about the work, and it was Zappos was an early stage startup at that point. I think it was kind of like Burton, like more like, do you love fashion? Like, yeah. Do you love skating and surfing? Yeah. Okay. Then, and you like the Giants and the Niners? You're hired. It was more like that than it was like anything else. Like, we've been through the ringer at like a Netflix or even like at a Twitter where it's like 7-person panel. Sometimes
uh, yeah,
you have to do a design test or whatever, right? Like those kinds of things. But I love that what you said is the worst thing that they can say is no,
yeah,
right? And as cliche as it sounds, it's cliche for a reason, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if
exactly.
you don't ask, you won't get it. But at least if you asked and tried and you didn't get it, at least you tried.
Yeah, I got two silly stories that are aligned with this. The first one is, um, while I was in college, there was a internship for like an agency that was an hour and a half away, and there used to be these books that would come out every year of all the agencies that won awards. And me and my like number one professor, Matt Cram, we would sit and we go through and we talk about the ones that won awards. And basically, I would go through and say, like, if an agency won more than two awards, I was going to try to figure out a way to apply for one of these. And that same year that we were going through those books, there was an internship at one of these agencies called Resource. And I applied. And at the time, I put my portfolio, it was a Flash website, onto a burnt CD, and then it submitted that way. And so I had to drive an hour and a half away, drop off the CD, and I was like, there's no way in hell this isn't going to go anywhere, but like, whatever, try it. And they called me up. And the one of the things that they do once you get past the first set of interviews is they do this like mixer where you go and meet all of the people that are like applying for this one job, and then you meet people at the agency. One of the weirdest events that
Wow.
I've ever been to in my entire life. And so I meet all these awesome people, all these really talented people that are going to art colleges and that are like about to graduate, and I was like, I want to say a junior at the time. And and it like really lowers my confidence on not, that I'm going to be able to get through all this. Then the next day is the full panel interview. And at this point in time, I'd never experienced anything like that. Like, I'd worked jobs, I'd been interviewed before, I could handle the one-on-one, but put you in front of a bunch of people that are going to really critique your work, that was like a first time for me. And I get into the room, and the person that had interviewed before me had left their resume, and they had already had four internships before this one, and they were already graduated. And I was like, there's no way, there's just no way this is going to happen. Two pieces in, the guy says, hey, I gotta stop you, and I'm really sorry about this, but there's a spelling error on this piece. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, can't go any worse than what's going on right now. And waited for a couple weeks, got the call back, they filled the position and everything, and they were really like thankful that I spent my time and whatever. And I just chucked it away as like it's experience, whatever. Right. I graduate. I'm 2 jobs into my career, so about 3 to 4 years into my career, and I get a call randomly from that agency, and they're like, "Hey, so we have a senior designer position open, and we've been watching you like and seeing your growth over the last couple of years and your work, and we'd really love for you to interview for this position." And on top of that, there was a couple people that I met at that mixer and then had made friends with that had put me in as reference without telling me, mind you. And so I get this call back to go work at this place that, had turned me down 4 years, 4 or 5 years beforehand.
Wow.
And all just from that, like that weird set of interactions, ones that are burned into my memory as like bad, you know, at the time to turning into this other like brand new thing. Which was it was amazing. It was like there's this seems so odd that this would be the way it would work. Um,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just don't know, right? And this is the way that I can relate to it, where oftentimes, and I was talking to my coach this morning about fear of rejection. Oftentimes, we think rejection is a a rejection of ourselves, like taking it personally.
mhm,
But in that case, they weren't rejecting you; they were just saying now's not the time,
correct.
right? And they're probably saving you from, hey, if we brought you on now, you might not do well right now, and then we would have. This isn't something we could revisit. But the fact that they said like, no, like thanks for coming out, it's just not the time. High school or junior you could have said like, "Oh, f them for not taking me," but then later on they said, "Yeah, we've actually it wasn't the right time. Now's the right time. We want to offer you a senior design role." And so,
Yeah,
oftentimes people take rejection as like a no, but it really is maybe just not right now. Now's
yeah.
not the time. Maybe we're not ready. Maybe you're not ready, but it's not a hard no. And so, like that's one thing I want people to understand is oftentimes there's a reason for it. It's not just a I don't like you.
And look, I think it's completely fair to feel that way in the moment, and like to get all your like your grief and negativity out and everything, and take a step back and like reevaluate what it was and like what you got from it and everything. Like that 100% set me up for all my all the subsequent interviews that I had. Like I had probably one of the toughest ones that you could have at that age. And um it really shaped a lot of like how I decided I was going to interview people. And like, a lot of what I think of when you get into leadership role is similar to like parenting is like what were the things you didn't like about being managed or led or anything, and then I'm not gonna do that. Or I'm gonna try my best not to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, at the time, I had gotten hired at that place, and then, like, a couple years in, I was asked to run the intern program, and the first thing I did was I killed that mixer meeting because I thought it was, like, the most barbaric thing that you could possibly do,
Uh,
and, yeah, but, like, that I think the another piece to what you're saying, I think is important, and I know it's hard for companies to do this sometimes, but if you're gonna turn somebody down, like, give them the feedback. Let them know.
mhm.
Like, don't I know it's easier to leave it open-ended so that there can be another conversation if you change your mind or whatever, but, like, it's really helpful to the person on the other side, the person that's interviewing, to know, some bit of information.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's a really powerful moment when you can help somebody on the other side, like, hey, maybe they just bombed because they were super nervous, right? And like there's ways to get around that, but like sometimes it's hard to like get that through and give like be the coach in that moment, help them out, you know. Our space is
Absolutely.
so small. Like the amount of people that I've interviewed and then met somewhere else and done something else, or people that have interviewed me and then I've ended up working with them later on, it's ridiculous because the space isn't as big as we think it is.
Yeah. And I bet you didn't have a spelling area on your portfolio ever again.
No, I mean, I wish that I could say that was the case. And being dyslexic is the worst. And it's one of those things where, while I don't think there was, but I won't say that there wasn't 100%. But what I did was I made sure that about 10 other people looked through my portfolio before I ever showed it to somebody else ever again. And even to this day, I'm still sharing it with other people to make sure that there isn't some glaring grammar error or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's always good. I want to kind of transition to what you're getting into now. So yeah,
Yep.
ultrafriends.xyz, which is a unique URL.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about what gap you are filling and what made you go down this path, and just tell us more about this business venture. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, um, I've been super fortunate to have been in the space for quite some time and had a lot of different experiences, both in big and small companies. But one of the things that has really got me excited over the years is like what we've kind of deemed 0 to 1, right? Like the idea that, hey, I have this concept or have this thing, but I really need to make it, like, get it out into the world and get it into someone's hands, start the A/B test, whatever the thing is, right? And I just get really excited about that starting point. That's one thing. And the second piece is, like, as I've kind of transitioned at times outside of being the IC to the manager, the director, the chief creative officer, whatever, I've really enjoyed building teams, building processes, helping people meet whatever the goal is that they're trying to get at. And when I was talking to my buddy Kevin about this, I was like, how can we merge these two concepts together? Because I think most people understand an agency, a studio, whatever it is, like, I have an ask, you can produce it, like, it works. But what about this concept around like leadership and consulting in that space? It's not as well known. Like, how do we like really get into that space? So our thought process is like, we prove by action, not by selling or pitching. We want to go and do the work and show you how we work. And if you think that's great and that aligns with what you want to do inside your company, then awesome. If there's opportunity for us to show you some of our creative skill sets or leadership skill sets, awesome. We're here for that. So right now, we just launched at the end of February, because I think it's funny to launch on the 29th, and that means that Ultra Friends will be 1 year old in 4 years. So, and it's just funny, and that leap years are just weird in general. And what we're doing is we're looking at helping out startups, Series B, Series C, Series D. You're trying to go from, we have an idea, to the next step. Maybe you're trying to raise money. Maybe you're trying to find market fit. Maybe you have a design team of like founding designers that are just like do it all, but you need like the next step above that. That's where we're trying to aim. That's our hypothesis right now, is like that we can provide a lot of value to that space, because my background being in product, visual design, branding, Kevin's is in branding, copywriting, video direction, growth marketing. And so like we can basically span the entire gamut of work that a creative team would need to do. So that's been our focus so far. But we're interested as guys that are in our late 30s, moving in a little bit further, being parents and everything, to have more control over our lives, our where we put our energy and investments, and want to prove to like our kids that you can build things and have fun doing it and be proud of the things that you output. And this seemed like, with the world as it is today, with all the layoffs and all the things that are going on, this felt like the right time to go and try it, And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we're going to put all of our effort into it right now and do our best. So that's the high level. I know it's a
Yeah.
kind of a roundabout way of saying all that stuff, but I think it's important to share, especially to, your listeners that are in this leadership space. Is like, there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot of opportunity, and like it doesn't have to stay stagnant forever. And that's kind of how we look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think we've talked about this before, you and I,
Yeah.
off camera, where there's especially in those stages that you talked about, there's just this gap in knowledge, and I think people are getting better, but they still don't know how to operate it because most of these startups will hire makers, like hands, right?
Mhm.
So when you're hiring your like head of design as like a 10-person company, you're usually hiring somebody who's like a maker, like a actual product designer. Maybe they have experience with A/B testing, maybe they have experience with some of those things, but have they executed an innovation roadmap
Yeah.
from start to finish, right? And maybe they have a PM who worked on product features, but never put together an entire product innovation roadmap,
Mhm.
right? And so that's the gap that I see you filling. Sometimes maybe in a permanent capacity, but sometimes maybe to get the program off the ground, right? And
Yeah.
the places we've been, there's a lot of is decades of rigor and like learning and multiple teams participating to make it work. So
Yeah.
for a startup to say like we have one product manager and one designer and to say like we're good, like that is a stretch. Not saying that you
Yeah.
couldn't do it, but hiring someone like you to help fast track that
Yeah.
could be the difference in product market fit or not.
Yeah. And on that one of the things you said is one of the things that me and Kevin have talked a lot about, which is like, is it our intent to be there permanently or long term or have retainer clients or what have you? And I keep on thinking of this thing. I'm pretty sure Chris Smith told me this at Netflix a long time ago. I was asking him, when you're a designer, you have these artifacts. You're making things, right? And you judge your worth and your skill based on the output. But as a manager of people, you're removed from that, right? So how do you figure out if you're doing a good job as a manager? And he said that the one of the best ways to know is one of the hardest ones to like understand, which is the best way to tell if you've done the right thing is when a person leaves the company that they're at and they're leaving for a good reason, right? Like more money, better position, they're shifting careers, whatever their initial goal was, if they're leaving on good terms and they're fulfilling whatever that goal was that they wanted and you are a part of that journey, that's when you know you've managed well. And he said like an additive points is that if you step away from the thing that you've built and it can continue to work without you being involved, that's also another great sign. So in my head, if you can take those two things together, like if I can go into a company, help them hire their head of design, if I can help them build out their team, if I can help them figure out their innovation strategies, figure out their go to market, whatever those things are, and stack those things up over a period of time and then walk away once that team is strong and understands and has a point of view and is going off in the right direction. Awesome. Like at that point, like, yes, there is like a concept of like, I'm running a business, I need to make money and all these things. But like at the end of the day, like that's what's going to give me energy to go do it again at the next place, not siphoning off somebody over a long period of time, but more so like if I'm actually providing value and that's being seen and appreciated, then I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and helping multiple businesses do that.
Yeah, because then I can
Yeah,
scale myself, right? Like I can scale what we do to more than just one place. Because if I was going to do that, I would just go back and work in house again. Like
right.
that's the part that I keep on thinking about. Is like, okay, well, what's the intent of Ultra Friends? And it's yeah, it's doing great work and everything, but like it's maximizing my potential impact, like long term. And the
Yeah,
more exposure I get, the better at that.
it's the old adage, you teach them how to fish,
Yeah, yeah,
right? You teach them how to
yeah,
fish, you don't just feed them, you teach them how to fish, and they'll feed themselves forever. Um, okay, well, that's fantastic, and we'll include the link in the show notes, so if people wanna find out more about you, and also if they want to learn how to work with you,
yeah,
they can reach out there. Um, Now I wanna get into some advice. So, knowing what you know now, I mean, you've already provided a lot of great nuggets. But knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger Travis?
Yeah, it's probably a book's worth at this point, but the ones that come to mind right now are, um, you don't have to go so fast. Like, that chip on my shoulder that I spoke about, it really was, um, probably too much, at the time, and then it was like, working a full-time job, grinding my freelance, doing all this stuff, constantly trying to figure out how to move up at whatever job I was in, and, like, trying to get to some place. Now, this came from a sense of, like, I wanna be able to provide for my family. I want to, be self-sufficient. I don't wanna live in debt. Like, there are reasons behind it. However, there was a point when I was, like, in my early 30s where I realized, like, I had done a lot in a very short period of time, and I still had a long ways to go, right? If the average retirement age is 65, I've got another 30 years doing this, if that's what I do, right? And there's so much more to do. And I didn't need to go so fast at the beginning, right? Now, that's not to say that I regret any of those things. It's more so like, while yes, if you do grind real hard, you can make it. But the question is it necessary? You know, do you need to do that? Which goes in my second piece is figure out what work life balance means to you. No matter if it's at an early age and early part in your career or it's later in your career, like really thinking about that because it can come up on you fast that if you have kids, you have a significant other, all these things, it's really easy to be a workaholic in our space and grind and be behind the screen at all periods of the day. But there's so much more to life than that. And I realize it comes from a bit of privilege and being able to talk about that when you have tech money and you're doing all these things. But like at the end of the day, that doesn't change it. Like if you're only going to do this, you're going to feel a little hollow at some point, or a little spread thin. So think about it before you burn yourself out.
Definitely follow that advice if you're listening. Steve Johnson actually gave me similar advice when I told him I was leaving Netflix.
Yeah.
Steve Johnson, the VP of design at Netflix, he told me because I told him I was leaving for spend more time with family. Like I spend half the year traveling and away from my family, and so he was saying no one on their deathbed ever wished they worked more.
Yeah.
Right? The things that they
Totally.
ask for is more experience, more time with their loved ones, like those things, right?
Yeah.
And when we hear these things, sure, like when we're in our teens and 20s and growing up, we're like, yeah, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I just want more paper so I can go do the things I want to do,
Yeah.
right? And then you get to our age, you start to have kids, you start to have other things in your life, and perspective changes, and other things come into focus, and values evolve, and values change.
Yeah.
And as I was going through that, my values changed, and I lived by that. Among other things he's told me, he dropped a lot of great wisdom on me. But that's true. I on my deathbed, I want to say the experiences I had. I want to talk about the life I lived, not the hours I worked or the things I missed out on.
Yeah. 100% agree with that. My other parting bit is something that I've learned over the last 6 or so years is that if you shift into leadership or management, it can be a very lonely endeavor. Um, you know, when you're an IC and you're in the throes of the work with other ICs and everything, there's this kind of bonding and sharing and everything you get from that. And while you can still be close to the people you lead, there is a clear separation, no matter how friendly or whatever that you are with your colleagues. And it's easy to hold all that in and to just like bear the burden of that feeling. um, it is really important, I think, to find people outside of your loved ones to talk to, get mentorship from other people that have been doing it, talk to
Hmm.
other people that are in your space doing a similar gig. Um, I have found similar to like, apply for anything and what's the worst they can say is no, is like if I see someone out on the internet that is doing amazing stuff and has like this online persona that I value and everything, like I'm gonna reach out to them and say, hey, like, would you be free to chat and everything? And I've been so lucky to meet so many people through that. But like it has also allowed me to like share the invent and like share the things that have been going on as a leader and hear different point of views on how to handle it. Because unlike when you're doing the design work and you can see it out in the open, a lot of like management and leadership is like behind the scenes. And it's hard to pick up on if you're not really paying attention to it. And it, I mean, it's similar. It happens really fast. Like if you decide to be a manager, it's like you're doing the work, and then all of a sudden you're just shifted into this whole nother space. And learning from others versus just like falling into the pitfalls every single time is well worth it. And if you're the type of person that loves to read books, there's plenty of books that are out there, podcasts. But like my thing was always I wanted to talk to another human about it. And so a lot of it was like find other people, talk about it, get your stuff out. Like I remember there was a point in time at one of the gigs I was at where the only time that I had communications with anybody I worked with was when something bad was happening. And so my day was just filled with like the fires that needed to be put out. And it like burned me out so quick because I felt like, well, am I doing a bad job? And realized that like this was only a small percentage of all the amazing things that we're doing. But like I'm the person that's responsible for fixing it when it's that. So like you're only hearing the bad news all the time. Right. And I remember someone saying, like, take a step back, like, look at all the great work your team's doing. You know, this is just only they need your help. They're coming to you because they trust you, you know, and that changed my day so fast. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think in Silicon Valley or any high performance cultures, stopping to smell the roses and celebrate the wins. We always talk about it,
Yeah.
but the actuality of it happening is very rare or few and far between. Or we're so high performing when someone says that was great work, you're like, yeah, let's move on to the next thing.
Exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
yeah, everything that you said 100%. And in the spirit of that, right? Well, let me say this first. Knowledge is free. So yeah, books and all that stuff and all that, like you can get the knowledge, but I think what you're talking about with the mentorship is learning how to implement it. Right, and
Hmm.
that's the harder thing, right? Because you can go out and read tons of books, but if people don't teach you or show you how it is to implement it, you can try and stuff and you'll eventually get there. But
Hmm.
to have someone say like, "What did you do to get over this? How should I think about organizational design? How should I
Hmm.
think about this?" Now you can read about that, or a mentor can just tell you like, "These are the things that I learned. This didn't work, and this did work."
Yeah.
Right. So in that vein, who were some of the mentors that you had that you would go to, if you wanna mention them, if you wanna give them some credit, that helped you through your journey?
I mean, there's so many. Like we talked about Steve Johnson. He was a big deal. When I left Netflix the first time, I spoke to him about the reasons and what I was getting into, and as I took on other roles, uh he was there for me. Even and sometimes it feels weird saying this out loud, like somebody that's the VP of design at one of the biggest companies in the world giving you the time of day. It's odd, but it's like, we earn the trust and respect from doing the work. And like that's how I was fortunate enough to get that. Chris Smith, who is well, I believe he's still a director, but I'm not sure what the title is at Netflix, was a big deal for me as well. Um, his tenure at Netflix is just amazing. Like seeing somebody that has been doing it for that long at a company like that is just insane. And so he's seen everything you can imagine.
Mhm.
So anytime I come into what I think is an odd situation and I talk to him, he's like, "Oh yeah, we've done X, Y, and Z, or seen this and that." And again, it's been it gives me the time of day. Um, I mean, there's so many people. I'm like so overwhelmed just thinking about it, to be honest. Um, Yeah, I like there's people when I think of like very specific like states in my career. There's an amazing human being named Stuart who runs the internet business company. Um, Amazing human. I remember I reached out to him because I saw what he was doing at Intercom back in the day, and the amazing creative work that was coming out of this like small shop, and the sheer volume. And I just randomly reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, I really love what y'all are doing. I'm gonna be in the Bay around these times. Can we meet up?" And he was like, "Sure." Brought me into his studio, got to see all this stuff, got to meet all these people, sent me home with a bunch of like goodies and whatever, and like told me all these things. I went back and started trying to implement it. And that was like 6, 7 years ago. And like constantly the ups and downs throughout my career, I reach out to him and say like, "Hey, am I doing this right? Like, what's going on and everything?" And he was one of those people that I had seen be in house and decide to start his own thing. And I was like, "Hey, can we talk about this?" Now, what's odd is that in my head, I would think that people would be defensive about sharing secrets and sharing like, "Oh, you want to start an agency and I'm an agency? Well, we're going after the same businesses. Like, why would I do that?" And he was like, "There's enough work out there for everybody." Like, and like he ran through and talked to me about all this great stuff and gave me a peek behind the curtain. And when I was thinking like, "Oh man, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I don't know enough. I don't have enough business acumen to be able to get through." He was like, "Oh no, dude! Like you've been able to run big orgs with inside companies. Like you can do this. You got this." And there's a bunch of people like that have been
Yeah.
there. Like, and like I said, it's like I'm like getting goosebumps and thinking about it. Just how fortunate I've been with people like that. And
Yeah.
the big thing I would say, connecting to this, because like I'm again with the overwhelming pieces, like I talk to people that are in different spaces and doing different things, so I'm getting different perspectives. Um, there was a point in time where I had a bunch of mentors, and they all just looked like me, and I don't mean that just in like a white guy with a beard and glasses, which most of them were. There was also just a sense of like they've only experienced what I've experienced. And like that's going to be very limiting and narrowing. So, like going and talking to copywriters, like that's not a skill set I have. I've worked with copywriters, but like who's somebody that's managed copywriters? Because maybe someday I'm going to have to manage a copywriter. And I did. Same with video, same with like, people that were in the AI space, lots of engineering managers, like a totally different vibe and a totally different way of leading and everything. And the thing that I think is different from say like books and meeting with people is that instead of like sometimes when people read books, they say like, "Okay, this is the one way to do it, and I'm going to implement it as exactly as being stated in front of me." Whereas when I'm talking with people, I'm taking it all in as a sponge and filtering out what I think is going to work for me because like they are very different,
Hmm.
different people. And so I just took in as much information as I possibly could in that sense, and then I tried the things I thought would work, and some things work, some things don't. That's
Yeah.
fine, but it's the life A/B test, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so it's been a great conversation, and
Yeah,
we're at time. And I definitely want to have you back. But so we're gonna have everybody. They can, if they want to reach out to you, they can find stuff in the links in the show notes. I think we're gonna have your Instagram, email,
yeah.
we'll throw your LinkedIn and the agency. Um, but yeah, thanks for joining us. And what any last words before we go today? And knowing that we're probably gonna have you back because there's a lot
Yeah.
more stuff that I still want to learn about Midwest design.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would love to talk about that. Um, I feel like super blessed that you invited me on here, and that like our friendship outside of this is really important to me, and I think it goes along with like the mentorship. Like I was hesitant to say it earlier, but like as I've gone through my ups and downs, I've reached out to you many times and everything, and you've always been there for me. So I really appreciate that. We'll tear it up a little bit on that. And yeah, I mean, like I think there's something to be said about trying your best at all this stuff. Like, and whatever your best is like that's fine. And so I think if you get anything out of any of the stuff that we just talked about, like, just know that if you try your best, something good will happen eventually. So,
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Travis. Thanks for dropping the knowledge.
yeah,
Congratulations
thank you.
on Ultra Friends. Uh, I'm hoping some folks reach out to you to be clients or even just understand your business a little bit better, and maybe they can learn a little bit about design,
Yeah,
creativity, and branding.
yeah. Hit me up. And it doesn't always have to, like, as much as I appreciate the opportunity to work with other people, like, if I'm gonna live the words I just said, like, if you have questions, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things, just hit me up with questions. I'm game to help people out that are in this space. So
Nice. On that note, thank you all for joining us again for another episode. Thank you, Travis, for being on. Take care, and we'll see
yeah.
you all next time.
See you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today and let's make your future a reality.